Why are you so pissy? Why are you so pissy? Why are you so pissy?
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Better Late Than Never, episode 3. I am Bag Milk, and I'm good and pissy.
Why are you so pissy?
A lot has happened this week with the Edmonton Oilers, despite the fact that there's only been one game. So we're just going to jump right into it. A lot to get to. First of all, I want to thank our friends at Arcadia Brewing Co. Check them out on Instagram and Twitter, Arcadia Brewing Co., and on their website at Arcadia YEG, Y-E-G, that is, arcadiayeg.com. Get everything that you need from them. They've got trivia coming up on Monday, the 24th at 7:30. It's $10 a team, 1 to 4 players per team. Get your entries in. They are talking about it right now, my friends at Arcadia.
Why are you so pissy?
Well, Jim, I'll tell you why I'm pissy. Because the Edmonton Oilers lost arguably their worst game of the year against the Ottawa Senators on Saturday. And as a result, the nation is upset. So we're going to dive right into it. I've got a lot to get to. I've got Jason Gregor coming up here in just a second, or just a couple of minutes, I should say. So let's dive into the news. Welcome to the news. Bag Milk reporting live from Bag Milk Manor. Live in Edmonton, Alberta, it is 9,000 degrees below zero. It was in the plus temperatures just a few days ago, then it started raining. How does that happen? I have no idea. As I mentioned earlier off the jump, the Oilers had arguably what I think is their worst loss of the season. I'm going to talk about that a little bit with Gregor coming up in a couple of minutes, but it was just a tough one, man. Through 40 minutes, the Oilers were winning 3-1, I should say, 30-1. 3-1. Everything looked in control, and then the third period just fell off in a massive way. Allowed 5 goals against, ended up blowing the lead, blowing the game, losing 6-4. It was a complete disaster, and I don't know what we can do about it. I don't know what needs to change here, but I promise you this is one of the ugliest losses we'll ever see. Now, when the very next day, a bunch of the players were asked about it. Connor looked completely dejected in his post-game interview. Dave Tippett looked upset. Leon was upset. Again, we'll get to that some more. But one beacon of hope, one guy who shone through like a beacon of light was Brendan Perlini when he stepped up. I think it was the next day. Correct me if I'm wrong, everybody. JSBM Bag Milk on Twitter. Correct me if I'm wrong. But when Brendan Perlini stepped up to the microphone, he brought a little bit of levity, a little bit of clarity, and a little bit of positivity.
You know, especially at this level, it can be like so scrutinized or under a microscope per se of like, oh, not doing X, X, and X, or you're doing all those, you know, sometimes it's too much where it's like, you know what, at the end of the day, it's hockey. Go out there, play like you're on the pond like a kid and enjoy it, have fun, be positive, and, you know, good things will happen. You know, I think if it's the other way and you're carrying negativity and bad attitudes or things like that, it can obviously go down. But the more, you know, you bring that positive energy and spirit, you know, I'm a big believer in law of attraction. So whatever you think about, you bring about.
Brendan Perlini, a lot of people gave him some love for his positive attitude. A lot of people gave him some love for, despite the fact that he hasn't been playing a whole lot, he's contributing right now. He doesn't seem to let that affect his play. But you know what? It's a results-driven business. And for Oilers fans, it is hard for them to get excited about losses, even though maybe there are some good things that happened in there. But the reality is there was a lot of things that went wrong. And while I do appreciate Brendan Perlini just giving a little bit of positive thinking in there, he talked about the law of attraction, which I appreciate as well. I don't know that it's going to go all that far, depending on what happens on Thursday. You know, if the Florida Panthers come into town tomorrow, I'm recording this on Wednesday afternoon, by the way. I don't know that anything is going to get any better, despite guys like Brendan Perlini being like, this is part of the process. We need to work through it. We need to learn how to win as a group again.
Why are you so pissy?
Again, I mean, that's the quote of the day. That is the quote du jour around the nation right now, and with good reason. Because this happened.
The losses now. Is there one thing that you, in your own mind, you're saying we got to get better at that?
Yeah, we have to get better at everything.
Would you like to expand on that?
No. You can do that. You know everything.
Why are you so pissy, Leon? Why are you so pissy?
I'm not. I'm just answering your
Yeah, you are. Whenever I ask you a question.
I gave you an answer.
Not very good one.
Okay.
I have one more for you. Leon, you show your frustration on the ice last game against Ottawa. Is that a good thing when you show it so the other team knows you're frustrated?
Yeah, it's a great thing, for sure.
Good.
Yeah. How awkward was that exchange, you know?
It's only a game. Why you have to be mad?
I'll tell you why we have to be mad, Briz, is because the Oilers have lost 12 of 14 games. Why is Leon so pissy? I imagine that had something to do with it, you know? I imagine having that many losses tagged in is a big reason.
Why are you so pissy?
I think that is it. I think that Leon is unhappy. I know we got asked the same question a couple of times. I was a little bit surprised that Jim went there. I'll ask Jason Gregor about it when he jumps on with me, but as far as a sound bite goes, that one is as good as it gets. I don't know that we've ever had a soundbite quite like that. And as we do at Oilers Nation, we turn that into a t-shirt real quick. So if you want a We Are All Pissy t-shirt, which I encourage you to get because it is the hottest tee of the season, you got to go over to nationgear.ca and grab one and do it quickly. Otherwise, you will miss out. This is a one run and done. And to be honest, they're moving. They are moving. When we came up with the idea to take you behind the scenes, that press conference went on. I tweeted out, "We are all pissy." That started to draw some attention. That tweet started to move a little bit because you know what? Leon's pissy. Of course he is. The team keeps losing. We're all pissy. We're all feeling like it. We are all upset about what's going on with the Oilers right now. So why are you so pissy? Well, I mean, there's plenty of reasons. There are plenty of reasons, and I don't know that it's necessarily a mystery. These losses don't sneak up on you, do they? No, they don't. They don't, my friends. They just do not. And let me tell you one thing. The Nation is as spicy as I've seen it in my time covering this team. I've been a fan my entire life, but I've been covering the team with OilersNation.com for about a decade or more. I don't know if I've ever seen it like this. So that's another thing that I'm going to ask about with Jason Gregor when he joins the podcast here shortly. Again, if you want a pissy tea, this is a one run and done. If you want one, don't wait. Get over to nationgear.ca and check it out because these will be gone and they will not come back. I promise you that. So get one while you can and see what you can do. Oh, hello. Today's guest on Better Late Than Never. You know him from the Jason Gregor Show. You know him from OilersNation.com. You know him from the DFO Rundown, recording Mondays and Fridays. Jason Gregor, thanks for jumping on with me, sir.
BM, how you doing?
I'm excited to have you, buddy.
This is very confusing because as I know that this is audio, but we're on Zoom and I can see you, and it says, and I know your real name, and it says your name, and I almost called you by your name. Like you should put on your tag, Bag Milk. It's confusing.
Well, I'm going to change that right now just to make sure that we are both on the same page here, even though we have been working together for a long time. Appearances matter. There we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
There you go. Exactly. Because I know that you want your identity very hush hush. So I don't want to expose you.
Honestly, at this point, it is the worst kept secret around this city in terms of at least people that follow the website. If you come to an event, I mean, I'm going to meet you. So probably a worst kept secret. Jason, we're going to talk about the Oilers. Obviously, it is a barn on fire right now. But first, when I told Wanye last night that you were coming on the podcast today, I said I had an idea for a story that I wanted to get your take on. The Nation now has been around a long, long time. Back in November, Playmaker acquired it outright. I've heard this version of the story from Wanye and Jay. I've heard their version of the pitch to you to join Oilers Nation originally, all those years ago. I've heard their version of the story. So I thought it would be interesting to get your take on what those early meetings are like with Wanye and Jay, trying to convince you to join Oilers Nation. But before you get into your side of it, I checked back in with both of those boys last night. So I've got some quotes from them that I need addressed, and I'm hoping you can jump in with this. Now,
all right.
From Wanye, he said, meeting number one took place at arguably the fanciest restaurant in the city which we all know is Century Grill. The question for you, Jason Gregor, do you still believe that Wanye was right taking you to Century Grill?
Yes, he's correct. It was on Calgary Trail. It's like a buffet place now.
That's what he said. He's just like, what I thought was the fanciest restaurant in Edmonton is now a buffet place. And that's where we took Gregor to try and show him that we meant business.
Yeah. I don't know if it was that fancy, but it was, I live close in the South Side. So I think I think at the time, was living South Side. So we just went and met there. So at that stage of our lives, we might've thought it was the fanciest restaurant.
Second, I checked in with Jay last night and he said, actually, you know what, buddy? There were 2 meetings. Gregor big timed us at Century Grill, and it wasn't until we took him to the Hudson's White Ave patio when we finally tricked him to joining us. Is this true, Jason Gregor? Did you big time them in meeting 1?
Well, I guess what's the definition of big time? I was there. I thought the meeting went pretty well. I remember it. I think I caught them off guard in the meeting because I didn't big time them. They asked me to write. And at that point I had owned my radio show for a few years. So I had a little bit of entrepreneurial spirit and I liked kind of what they pitched. So I countered and said, well, can I buy in? And I don't think they were ready for that. So they needed the second meeting because, I surprised them with that. So I don't know if I would call that big time. I always laughed. She's like, we didn't think that would remotely be a possibility, but you know what? Really knew the internet. Like Jay's the business guy, really knew the internet quite well. And obviously it was, it was something that I thought obviously would grow, not to the level of it that it went to. And, and Jay were both really passionate about it. And I think, their passion was really kind of what sold me more than anything else. It was, I wanted to get into more writing at the time. I'd been written in sports scene and doing a little bit of stuff here and there, but I want, writing's a little bit more permanent, right? When you're on the radio show, you have good ideas, but if somebody missed it, people can always link to articles. Nowadays, back then you got to remember my show wasn't podcast like it is now, right? Mm-hmm. Like there wasn't archived where you could go back and listen to it. So it's different now than it was back then. But it really intrigued me. So definitely didn't big time them. I think I surprised them more than anything else.
Looking back now, again, the Nation is now part of the Playmaker family, and that got picked up back in November. Looking back now, all those years ago, did you ever kind of imagine it turning into what it did, where Oilers Nation now is a staple for so many people in terms of their daily sports lives? Well,
I knew Edmonton fans were always passionate, so I wasn't surprised by that. I'm more surprised that Wanye, stopped writing. Where the hell is he? Let's have a whole segment about that. Right?
This is a conversation.
Did the guy get carpal? Did he get carpal tunnel syndrome or something? Like suddenly can't write. But anyway, I say that somewhat in jest. He's fairly busy, but I'm not really surprised. Edmonton sports fans are different than a lot of other markets. Like they're very passionate. I think what Oilers Nation did well in the beginning was, it had guys that were literally fans, like, Wanye could speak to the everyday fan like yourself. And then they mixed in more of reporting stuff. And it seems to have a good combination of the two. Obviously when it started, I never thought we would grow and suddenly we'd own hockey fights and then we'd own Daily Face Off and, NHL Numbers and Puckpedia and all those other sites. That wasn't part of the original plan and pitch from, but I will say that it's a big visionary guy. And I do remember, not in our first or second meeting, but probably 8 months down the road, we would go out and, we'd meet. Usually we'd have the meetings, the three of us, when we realized we didn't have any sales. And so then we'd have to get some sales to pay the bills. So it was, the first few years was kind of fly by the seat of your pants because obviously I had my own company and Jay had their own other companies. And it was kind of a hobby really to begin. And then geez, guys, we need some. So then we put our heads together and go out and cold call some people and get some sponsors. And then that would run good for a while. And there was always, like anything, people see the finished product. Like any business person out there listening, the behind the scenes stuff can be the most stressful. The writing part was easy, right? That was kind of the fun stuff. As you've gotten more involved in it, I think you would agree that it's the behind the scenes stuff to make everything work that is extremely challenging and difficult at times. But the growth always, I remember he said a number, goes, I really think we can grow to this. And I'm like, you're delusional, right? But he was actually.
Do you remember any of those numbers early on? Do you remember like some of those early visions of being like, get out of here? There's no.
Honestly thought, I remember when I bought in, he was like, you know what? I honestly think like in a few years, the way the internet is, like we could sell our company for, I think he said like $2 million. And I was like, okay. And I was like, hey, great, buddy. Sure. That would have been fantastic, even at that level. And then, just continue to grow. And I think one time he threw out even 5. And then ultimately, it sold for a ridiculous amount of money, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. So
it really is.
It's been a really fun journey. And really with Jay, obviously we became pretty good friends too. That's what kind of made it more fun. And, we have a lot of other business ventures and, we've had a lot of fun parties and different things like that. So, it turned out a lot better and bigger than I probably ever initially imagined it would.
Well, one of the things about Oilers Nation is just the community surrounding the website is also endlessly fascinating because like you said, we throw the parties, we throw the events, we raise money for charity. It's not just about reading about a hockey team at this point. It's grown well beyond that. As we saw yesterday, which we're going to dive into here with the Pissy tees that we've now got going up. It's the hottest fashion of the season here in January 2022. So we're just going to dive into that. Yesterday on Twitter, I said, Jason Gregor's coming on the podcast. What kind of questions do you got for him? The overwhelming question that everybody was asking was about hard questions in the media. You're in the media. You sat in those press conferences. You've asked the questions yourself. What's your take on what does a difficult question even mean to you, Gregor?
Well, I usually when someone says ask a hard question, I say, okay, what's a hard question? And then they write back. I'm like, well, that's not really a hard question. So the interesting thing is yesterday had nothing to do with a hard question because the question Jim Matheson asked Draisaitl, he asked Nurse and Tippett too. Hey, I don't like to dive into, if two guys don't get along. I've had my own tete-a-tete, if you want to call it, with players over the years. Rarely over a question, though. Usually it was over some other things. And, Leon and I had a really good FU one day to each other in the room. And the difference is no one ever sees it, right? That's on Zoom. And so it becomes bigger. People will disagree. And, somebody feels like, hey, you know what? Maybe you've been annoying me with your questions for a while. And the other guy thinks, well, you've been annoying me with your answers. And so usually it comes to a head. And then they talk it out. And I can only talk from my experiences, with Leon. It really didn't even have a question to do with me. The topic I think was about Zach Kassian. And somebody had asked a question in the dressing room the day earlier. And it wasn't even me. And I just happened to be back then when the room was open. Like they'd room me and it was like a herd, right? The media standing outside the room. They open the room and you just walk in. And I just happened to be the first guy that day. Usually I'm not the first guy in the room. And I just happened to walk in the room and Leon and I get along. And I saw him and he looked at me and he goes, you guys are effing idiots, right? And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, that's dumb. And I just looked at him like, hey, dude, I didn't ask that question. So don't call me. And my biggest pet peeve is I can't stand when people say the media. I only speak for Jason Gregor. I don't speak for any other media member. They all speak for themselves. I don't agree with every person's article or their take. Like, give me a break. Of course not. I only can speak for myself. So anybody, when they try to lump in the media, I instantly am like, dude, you have no idea, or girl, you have no idea what you're talking about. You're uninformed. If you have a beef with Jason Gregor, then say, hey, I don't like that Gregor said this. I have no problem with that. Ask me directly, but don't lump me in with other people when you don't know if I agree with them. And the other thing is, I'm not in the business of going, now I'll disagree with someone and I'll have no problem. If someone has a real take that I don't agree with, I'll say, hey, I don't agree with that. And they don't have to agree. I'm not chummy with every media person. Like, that's impossible, right? In a dressing room, not everybody on the team gets along. I'm a little bit, I look at it as it's still a competition. You're competing with other media people in my eyes. You can be respectful, sure, right? I'm respectful, but I don't agree with every line of question that someone asks. And some days I'm just like, oh my goodness, I would have never asked that question. And that's fine. But when I hear someone say tough question, like, I think a lot of people believe tough questions should mean insulting and yelling
combative
at the person, right? And it's be like, hey, Ken Holland, you're an idiot. Like, how did you not know Mike Smith was getting injured? Oh, really? Like, I love that. That's the new line thing. Well, he should have known. Oh, really? So should he have known that Ryan Nugent-Hopkins would get injured? Like, at what level is the age automatically more injury prone? You don't know that. Zdeno Chara, is he injured? And he's 5 years older than Mike Smith. So how many years older is Tom Brady? That guy plays forever. Now, maybe Mike Smith has got to start bathing in some of those oils that Tom Brady's bathing in. I'm not sure. But to me, predicting injuries is a great thing to say after the fact. That's all. So the Oilers' construction of their team, obviously it hasn't panned out. A lot of it's on goaltending injuries for sure, but I also think now there's more questions. I've written the article about, some of the deployment by the coaching staff. Yep. And to me, you can ask a respectful question but you can't get the answer, right? Like I can ask the question 10 times. Some people want to hear Ken Holland say, I messed up. So until he says that, they're never going to be satisfied. But I can't get him to say that. I could ask the question a million times. I can only ask the question. You can only ask the question. And then it's up to the guy to give the answer he wants.
I think it's really interesting too that, I've never asked, I've asked a couple of questions. This is of Todd McClellan back when he was doing something with Sports Central. That's the only time I've ever asked a head coach a question. But for a lot of us that are just on the fan side of the argument, we've never asked anything to somebody's face. So I find it very easy from my side of the fence just to be like, oh, I would have said this, I would have said that in a press conference, when really it doesn't work that way. Yeah. And I always like to approach it. I like to think that I'm fairly level headed at it. I believe the NHL is really hard. I respect jobs that are hard. And I don't believe in insulting someone to say, it's like when people analyze a player and say he's terrible. No one in the NHL is terrible. Now, They might make one terrible play and run bad decision at times. That's going to happen. But if your analysis of a player is they're terrible, it's a lazy analysis because they're not terrible, right? Well, that's funny too, because I played, pre-pandemic, I was playing shinny with some buddies a couple of years ago, and a former NHLer that a lot of people would maybe call terrible was on the ice with us. And let me tell you one thing, a guy who's in the NHL compared to just us schlubs going out there and skating around is not terrible. I promise you.
No, not at all. Like it, you know what? Like obviously they're not all McDavid, right? Mm-hmm. So you compare to that and that's fine. But I look at I don't even know everybody. The other thing is what you determine a tough question is going to be different than anyone else. So I always, most of the people every now and then I'll say, okay, well, tell me what a tough question is. And I think honestly, maybe 1 out of 20 times I'll get one. I'm like, you know what? That's a pretty good question. I don't have a problem with that. And it's all how you word the question, right? And the other thing is the scrum format. I just want to say it sucks. I'll say it right now. The scrum format's the worst format. Because think about when you're at a party and there's 8 people sitting around. Mm-hmm. Now, let's say 2 of them are really good friends of yours and the other people you kind of know, and somebody asks you a story or an opinion on someone, you're not going to tell the real story because you don't know those people. And here's the truth about the relationship. You have to form a relationship as a media person with each individual player. Some guys I have better relationships than others. Some took a lot of time. And then once they trust you, you can have a more in-depth conversation. And usually those happen one-on-one because I hate Zoom because I have some story angles that I want to approach. But now when I ask the question, everybody else can write that angle. It's the worst, right? Yes. So I can't wait till we get rid of the Zoom. And the head coach is always scrummed. And I don't like that either, but I understand because everybody wants to talk to the head coach. It's one where I find you can get better stuff one-on-one. I learned that covering the Elks when I first started because they have a dressing room of 50 players. And, they used to have it where you could come in and sit down. The dressing room was open for an hour. There was media for an hour. Players would come in and out and you could go talk to a guy, offensive lineman, receiver. And some days I would just sit beside him and talk, hey man, how's this? Ed Hervey and I became friends because he was a big sports fan. He actually liked sports talk radio. He grew up in LA. He listened to it all the time. And so we started talking about that. Then I found out he's a big Lakers fan. And so then once he got to know me, when I would ask a supposed hard question, he didn't take it like I'm attacking him. But when you're in a scrum and there's 10 people and maybe you don't like some of them, well, guess what? You're naturally going to be defensive. Automatically. It doesn't matter who you are. So if we could eliminate scrums, it would be much better.
Do you guys, this is just getting into the nuts and bolts of it, I guess. Do you guys in the media or just the reporters who are there, the journalists that are there, do you compare what kind of questions you're going to ask ahead of time, or does it just kind of flow freely and just what happens when you get called upon? You just check something off your list.
Yeah, I've never like guys I work with, Rashog and I sometimes, because we usually sit beside each other. We might I say, hey, what are you going to ask them? Which if there's usually when it's, there's something that's going wrong and be okay, how do we approach it? Because sometimes you try to warm up the person you're interviewing, right? So you don't come out with guns ablazing the first question because you're going to get their backup, right? So you try to at times, and I learned this is the first question you're not going, throwing a heater high and inside, right? You might throw one soft. So then the person relaxes, they're not tense. And then you can say, hey, by the way, what happened on that third goal, man? You made a terrible, you made the wrong read. What happened? If you ask that third, you got a much better chance of getting an honest answer than if you come out and say, hey, you just lost the game. What'd you think of that third goal? Right? Like there's still a strategy. It's basic human interaction when you talk to someone in any setting of life. It's really no different. If you think that it's your right as an interviewer. Like I learned Ron Durdo is one of the best instructors I ever had. And I've always tried to live by this. Like when I don't like media, people, if you're a reporter who claim, oh, that guy's a terrible interview. And because some guys aren't great at interviews, but guess what? Some people who ask the questions aren't great at asking a question. And so 50% of the interview is on the interviewer, on the reporter. If you don't ask a good question, how can you expect to get a good answer? And I know sometimes when I ask, I'm like, that was a terrible question. No, I didn't word that right. I'm not going to get a good answer. I don't blame the guy who I asked because maybe I went on too long or I made a statement rather than a question. You always got to remember the simple who, what, when, where, why. And if you can get that in, then you got a better chance of getting a better answer. I take pride in my interviews. I think I'm a lot better in one-on-one situations, no question, because you can get more out of any person one-on-one.
100%. Back to Twitter here, Gregor. Gregor, you had the Oilers last week at OilersNation.com making the playoffs. Do you still feel that way, or do you regret that article?
They've played one game. Like, trust me, it was a brutal game. But see, that's the problem with the Oilers. The Oilers have lost 6 games in a row, but that 6-game losing streak has spanned 32 days, right? Like, yes. I think that's what people have to understand. This is usually a 6-game losing streak is maybe 12 days, right? Maybe 2 weeks. And it's brutal. It's 2 weeks, but then it ends. This is coming when they play Florida on Thursday. That'll be the 33rd day since they won in Seattle before Christmas, right? So you have extended breaks for Christmas. Then you have the 10-day break after Toronto. Now you have another 4-day break after arguably the worst loss in the organization for at least the last 3 years, for sure. And I would argue, because the decade of darkness doesn't compare, because the team sucked. You expected them to lose. When you're up 3-1 against a 30th place team and you're 2-9-2, and then you gag on it like they did in the third, like, trust me, that's a kick in the nuts, man, for sure. So I don't regret anything. Like, thinking you're going to be right about every prediction, but the Oilers are still good enough. The LA Kings aren't great. The Anaheim Ducks aren't great. The Calgary Flames aren't great. You have to look at the opposition. I'm not saying I don't think the Oilers are going to the Cup, but to make the playoffs isn't a big reach. Like, they're not going to go 2-10-2 in their next 14 games.
This stretch is arguably one of the worst stretches we've covered just in terms of OilersNation.com for the vibes around the team and the fans in general. You've done this way longer than I have. We worked together at ON a long time, but is this kind of the weirdest / angriest you've seen the fan base?
I think when you have expectations, as the fan base should have, as the team had, and you start out 16-5, and I always say, hey, the Oilers aren't a 16-5 team because no one's a 16-5 team over the course of the year. Very rarely. Obviously, there's been some, but it's rare. To think that, the Oilers were going to win 50 games was unrealistic, but to think that they were going to go 2-10-2, and the fashion they've done it, they can't score first to save their life. Their penalty kill stinks. Their power play has gone in the tank by their standards. Heck, even their best players by their standards are struggling. Like, David doesn't get outscored 5-on-5. right? For a 14 game stretch. He doesn't only have 7 points 5-on-5 in a 14 game stretch. Like, I'd have to go back and I'd be curious to find out if that's ever happened other than maybe his rookie year, his first 14 games. Honestly, I got to go back and look that up because I doubt it. So, everything that could go wrong is going wrong right now. So I understand the frustration. This would obviously be more disappointing than, because when you have low standards like you did from 2007 to 2016, you almost you accept it. You don't like it as a fan, but well, the team's just not that good. The team this year is good. They're not great, but they're good, and they definitely should be better than 2-10-2. And the longer this extends, the more frustrated fans will be. And I think that's totally valid. I think it's a complete valid to question it. And at some point, the GM's got to make a move. Like, you can't, what are you going to wait to be 2-15-2? So something's going to have to change here soon, whether it's a trade, whether it's a coaching change. You got to do something. You can't just say, well, you know what? I think you can have a good team, but sometimes you got to shock the system a little bit.
I want to touch on some of the stuff you wrote about yesterday and your Help Me Understand article over at OilersNation.com. First, I want to check in on Brendan Perlini. You said, why isn't he playing more? And I tend to agree with you. What's your take on why Dave Tippett seems to really go heavy on the top 6 guys, Connor and Leon specifically? I mean, I get it. If you're Mariano Rivera and you got one pitch, you throw that pitch all day. But I also agreed with you that a guy like Perlini is getting some stuff done with very few minutes. What's your take on that?
Well, I asked Dave about it yesterday, and he said, hey, his play away from the puck, he wants to improve. And I get it that, you don't always focus on that. But at the same time, I counter and say, well, you've got other guys who might be better away from the puck, but they're not better with the puck, not even close. Perlini is tied. During this 14-game run, he's tied for the team lead in 5-on-5 goals. And he's only played 57 minutes at 5-on-5. I know I'm talking 5-on-5 scoring. So Perlini, like when you say, hey, the one thing he's really good at is scoring. Well, last I checked, scoring goals is the biggest ultimate difference maker in the outcome of a game. Right? Yes. It's like people can, well, Chris Russell, look at his Fenwick or his expected goals. I don't give a shit. Look at his goals against, actual goals that cause teams to win or lose.
Yep.
For 3 years, he's above 50% on a team that isn't good 5-on-5. So maybe at some point in your analysis, if you're all analytics focused, you have to look and say, maybe for some players, certain statistics don't really work for them, right? It's like Leon Draisaitl. Remember, his shooting percentage, he'll never sustain that. Well, he's basically been a 20% shooter for his entire career. Some guys are just, he doesn't shoot a lot, but he's good at it. So I look at Perlini and I'm like, hey, I would have played him earlier. I would have played him more. Now I'm not saying I'm suddenly playing him 19 minutes a night, but when you're in a game and he scored on a quick shot, like he never hesitates, puck's off his stick. Yep. They've played well. They haven't been scored against. Why are you only playing him 5 minutes? Like, that to me, there is a game. And so now the next game he's in your top 6. And I'm like, well, you got to make a better in-game adjustment. And you can and I get that, hey, the McLeod line was playing well and the McDavid and Draisaitl, you know what though? They got their ice time last game based on reputation. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, I'm not saying sit McDavid and Draisaitl. I'm not an idiot. I'm suggesting that maybe that was one game where you say, guess what? They're only going to play 20 minutes instead of 22 because that other line was going. We're only talking a difference of 3 or 4 shifts. And I don't think Perlini's suddenly going to be, I hope he is. Because like when we talked earlier about interview guys, like Brendan Perlini is one of the most insightful guys I've had on the show. He's very relaxed. His parents, I've had both his mom and his dad on the show. Like they're just a relaxed family. And Perlini though said him leaving the NHL has made him every day in the NHL for him is the greatest day of his life now.
Sure.
Right. And I think he's a great example because there's a lot of people you get in the NHL and it's hard, but then you realize, geez, like, hey, this is good and I deserve it. But then when it gets taken away, like anything, right? If all of a sudden, you lose your job and you're like, my job's whatever. Well, suddenly you lose your job. When you get your next job, you're pretty thankful for it and you appreciate it more. Maybe it's like a relationship you're in, you have a girlfriend and a boyfriend. They're like, yeah, they're okay. And then they dump you because you're like, you know what? You're not treating me well. Well, that's either you take a step back and look in the mirror and say, hey, I got to be better. or you keep going down the same path. And Brendan Perlini said, you know what? I could get frustrated or I'm going to enjoy every day in the NHL. And I do wonder, though, at the same time, if Perlini's enjoyment and him being okay with everything, almost Tippett's like, well, he's never going to get upset, so I don't have to worry about it. Right. And that's a subconscious thing sometimes. Right. Because Tippett did talk about how last year the taxi squad, I agree. Now you got like 8 guys who are disappointed they aren't playing. And trust me, you're managing personalities and that's hard. So maybe sometimes there's easier guys. Well, you know, geez, I could play, but he's never going to get upset. So it's easier. And you don't even think about it that way rationally, but maybe subconsciously. But I hope Perlini gets a little bit of a run here, just to see what he can do. Obviously, he's got to be responsible defensively, but he shoots the puck. He shoots the puck, man, and he can. He gets it off his stick. So I would assume he'll get a few scoring chances playing with 97.
One thing that's interesting, since you talked about some minutes here, I'm looking at the recap from the Ottawa and Edmonton game from the other night. The lowest playing forward on the Ottawa Senators was actually Adam Gaudette, and he played 9 minutes and 20. So, and you compare that to the Oilers side, Brendan Perlini only played 5:23. So seemed like Ottawa was rolling their lines a lot more. Connor and Leon both had heavy days at 25 and 24 minutes respectively. So that's a lot of minutes for a forward.
And some of it came from that extended power play. You know, they were on for a minute shift. And there's another thing. At some point, you know what? If they're on for a minute shift, start your second power play unit or call a timeout. Like, there's got to be some other adjustments that I think are kind of easy adjustments. You don't always have to start your top unit, especially if they're fatigued. Give them a 30-second thing. Plus also make it a little bit more of a competition and see what happens. So like obviously early in the year, different. When you're running at 37%, then you're like, okay, I'm going to start them all the time. But you're only running for them at 18% now for 14 games. So every now and then that's a shock to the system. It's not a major change. And I'm not saying it would guarantee that it's success either, but you can't continue to do the exact same thing over and over again when it's not working. So you got to try some subtle things to change. And so obviously when you have McDavid and Draisaitl, it's very rare they're ever going to play less than 20 minutes. And especially if there's games with power plays, right? So I get that. And you know what, if they were playing less than 20 minutes, I'd probably be ripping on the coach because they're too good, right? So, but I would find ways to get other guys involved. And especially a guy like Perlini scoring. He's got 3 goals in his last 5 games. Jesse Puljujarvi has 1 goal in 12 games. Zach Hyman has, and this is 5-on-5, Hyman has no goals in 11 games. So I'm like, hey guys, like maybe I got to put Brendan Perlini on in the last minute of the game here because right now that guy can score better than some of the other guys.
This Oilers run has been obviously difficult to watch in terms of just the record, being outscored at 5-on-5, goals against, as we're talking about. What are you seeing from their style of play? Because for me, I get frustrated that the Oilers are, in my opinion, trying to play too pretty. I don't see any greasy goals going in for the Oilers right now. Watching a lot of hockey right now, you see teams hacking away at pucks in the crease. You see them digging for goals in there, just really putting the heart on and trying to get the garbage goals going. What do you see from the Oilers? What would you love to see change? Because for me, I'd love to see them get a little bit greasier out there. I'd love to see them be a little bit more physical. Now, I'm not talking about running a guy over. I don't expect you to always be able to just lay a huge body check on somebody, but I do expect that you can get into somebody's face a little bit more, make it a little bit harder to play against, even if it's just bumping up on somebody, getting a face wash in there, getting in a scrum a little bit, getting pissed off. What do you see?
See, to me, like a lot of people say, I don't like their system. Honestly, there's not much different in systems defensively. To me, it's philosophical. And you have to decide if you say, okay, you know what? And part of that can come from a coach to say, okay, guys, like everybody now, here's, and Strutty's talked about this. I've talked to other players about it. Some coaches say, hey, everybody, first period, everybody gets a hit. I know some people say, well, hitting's not important. And I would politely disagree with that, right? Like Ryan McLeod's a great example. McLeod's good young player, skates, but the way he skates, he doesn't have to run over anybody, but he can finish his checks. Like the first shift against Ottawa, you're 2-9-2. You come flying in. He's great on the forecheck. The defenseman has the puck, and McLeod just goes right by him. Right now, he moved the puck, sure, but he was there, easy, half second. You deliver a check, it maybe gets the crowd going in because with his speed, he might be able to hit guys a lot harder than he thinks, right? Mm-hmm. Like Josh Archibald and Drake Kajula, they're not big, but they were good hitters because they followed through and they were fast skaters. So you don't have to be the biggest guy to do it. But to me, that's a philosophical thing. when like getting in the lane to block shots. So you're either in the lane or you're not. If you're very close, you're just not in the lane. And that part of that's got to come from the players themselves. But I also do believe the Oilers are not they don't have a lot of jerks on their team, right?
Yes.
Cassian
100%.
can be a jerk, but Zach's more of a protective jerk. He'll chirp guys, but he's never really been a massive initiator like Andrew Shaw's or different guys like that.
Like a Brendan Gallagher type,
Sure, Matthew Tkachuk. Right.
Yep.
Tkachuk, God love him. He reignited the Battle of Alberta. And when he did, Cassian snapped. And then Cassian, now he's engaged. Right. And so they need other guys like that. Now, Archibald, not having him, they miss him. Because remember when Archibald laid out Jordan Greenway in Minnesota, 6'4", and the whole bench went nuts? Like little things like that. You have to find ways to change momentum of the game because goals just don't happen often enough. So you can't just be there was a nice stick check. Yeah, sure, that's great. That's not really going to get the juices flowing all the time. It's a good play and it's important. And I don't think Edmonton has enough of those guys. I also don't think they have an organizational philosophy that requires that. And so that's something that I would like to see change. But you've got to have some players who can play that way. And then more so to me, the prime example was, and he's not here anymore, was Patrick Russell. I don't know if you ever saw Patrick Russell off the ice. The guy was an Adonis. He was 6'3". He was shredded, 215 pounds. Did he ever hit anyone? Like he should have been to run over guys for fun. And he was never instructed. I would have just said, hey, Patrick, if you finish 2-3 checks a game, you're going to play. And so challenge the player, and then you have to live up to it as a coach. If you do that and you do it right, you're going to play. And so I think, I look at Tyler Benson, and it doesn't have great foot speed, but Benson's trying to reinvent himself. He's trying to be an agitator. So he's willing to pay the price. And right now, I think there's some guys who don't. But I also think I don't just blame the players. I blame the GM and the coach at the same time. That I'm not sure they have an organizational philosophy that has them playing a tough, hard, even in your face, demanding to say we want to be a harder team to play against.
Would you say the same thing about a shoot first mentality? Because I find, again, I think that the Oilers look past way too much. I would love to see them create their own chaos by, I'm not just saying throw pucks on net when there's nobody in front of the net, because the goalie's going to stop that every single time. But what I would like to see is guys crashing towards the net and throwing some pucks at pads and seeing what happens.
Well, and see, that's kind of twofold. I think you answered your own question there. You can't put pucks on net if no one's going. Now you can shoot the pad sometimes when you come down the right side, you shoot to the far right goalie pad so it comes out for a rebound to the other guy. You can definitely do that. But Zach Hyman, Jesse Puljujarvi, Kyler Yamamoto, early in the year I thought they were around the net more. I haven't seen it as much, right? Remember early in the year when Puljujarvi he was in scrums and guys were coming at him, and he's 6'4", and he just sticks his arm out. He doesn't have to fight anyone. I don't want him to fight anyone. But he was like, I don't care. I'm not. We haven't seen that either. The Oilers aren't even irritating the other team, and usually you irritate them by just being around the paint, right? Because you're going to tap the goalie inadvertently, or you're going to give him a little extra tap. Yamamoto's the smallest guy on the team, and I know he was going through an awful funk and he wouldn't shoot. But the thing about Yamamoto is, at least he gets it, to quote Todd McClellan, he plays inside of guys. I don't think Edmonton has enough guys to play inside. And I think that the reason they don't shoot it, although the Oilers actually, in this losing skid, BM, they are actually 13th in shots on goal per game. So they're trying to shoot more. Where they stopped shooting, I believe, is on the power play. That's the biggest one. And mainly 97. I crunched all the numbers. 97 early in the year, he was shooting almost double, that he was on the power play lately. And that can be a confidence thing for even the best players in the world. All of a sudden, I'm looking past. But you got to get some ugly goals, because even if you just have somebody going to the net, how many times do we see it? It hits off a skate. It's an ugly goal. But as I've always said, there's no pictures on the score sheet. And if you're a Zach Hyman, you give two bleeps if it goes in off your stick, top shelf, or goes in off your skate and goes across the goal line. You get a goal either way. And for him, he'd love it.
Well, Oilers fans know full well it's the reason OilersNation.com started. Ryan Smith was a guy who scored a lot of goals from standing right in front of the net.
As he said, man, there's bags of money around the crease. You just got to be willing to go get them.
Another thing I want to touch on is you wrote about Duncan Keith yesterday and how he has been very steady for the Oilers. I just want to get your take on that because I agree that he's been better than I expected, to be honest. The contract for me is still problematic, but that's not Keith's fault at this stage. He signed that many, many years ago. What are you seeing from Duncan Keith? Because on your article, the numbers and your eyeballs are both saying this is a guy that the Oilers need.
Well, you're seeing a player who, early in the year, I thought Duncan Keith maybe at times, was trying too hard, right? You want to make a good impression. And the Oilers were winning. So his mistakes weren't a big deal. It's funny, now they're losing. You don't see a lot of egregious errors from Keith, right? On a team that's been getting outscored badly at 5-on-5, he's 10-6 goals for against. And he plays he gets more defensive zone starts and offensive zone starts. We know that usually that it's harder to have positive numbers that way. He's a competitor. Like, you watch Keith, he's not a huge guy, but he competes. And that's just a desire. And the thing is, you heard that from a lot of his teammates in Chicago, that he competes hard. And so people are like, well, if he's a leader, I'm like, yeah, but what do you expect Duncan Keith to do? Is he going to go around the locker room, grab everyone by the scruff of the neck, compete harder? Like, you can't do that, right? Like, you can challenge guys every now and then, but ultimately, when you're on the bench, if so-and-so doesn't want to get in the lane properly to block a shot, you can tell him, get in the lane, but then it's up to him to actually get in the lane, right? Like, there's still 90%, 95% of the onus is on the individual player to do their job, right? Duncan, the thing is, even at a 5.5 cap hit, if you look at all of his numbers and how he's playing, there's value in that, right? And I understand, sure, you know what, maybe if he was less, I get all that, but I'm not a big believer in, so if they would have retained $1 million, now he's 4.5. Like, what's that extra million going to do? Who would they have signed with that extra million? Like, other than people saying, well, it just looks optically better. Sure. Would it have made a massive difference? And I don't think it changes how he's playing. I think Keith's been fine, and they need more guys to have attention to detail. Like, look at certain battles on the ice, and some battles are more important than others. Just like some faceoffs are more important. A neutral zone faceoff can add to your faceoff percentage. You heard it, but it doesn't impact the game like a defensive zone draw that you lose cleanly, goes back to the point, they shoot and score. Well, that draw, way more impactful, right? And the thing about Keith is he is better at impactful battles, the meaningful ones. He doesn't lose those as often, right? And if he does, he makes it really hard on the opposition. And the other thing about Keith that I've been most impressed by is watch his passing. He's their best passing defenseman on the team. He's quick. He gets up. Sure, he misses some passes. That's not what every passer, McDavid and Draisaitl missed passes, but watch how many quick, good passes Duncan Keith makes. He's actually been better than I expected here for the last 2 months.
Jason, we're going to wrap this up. I want to thank you again for your time, but I've got a bit here on Better Late Than Never that I need your input on. As adults, I find that when I was growing up, I didn't understand how much money my parents were spending on groceries, specifically some of the items I was just murdering through, like cheese. Last week on this podcast, I did a full 15 minutes about people telling me what they think is too expensive at the grocery store. For me, it's cheese. For me, it's beef jerky. Love both of them. I will pay any price for both. What are you? Now that you've got your son, you're a married man, you're out grocery shopping, what's too expensive to you at the grocery store?
Well, I know you talked about cheese, and before I get to that, have you ever had the balsamic Bellavitino?
I have not.
See, I don't skimp on cheese. Another cheese that you need to try is coconut Gouda. Don't skimp on coconut. You can't get coconut Gouda just at any. You got to go to I get it at the Italian place in St. Albert. But I'm telling you, it's a game changer for anybody listening. Coconut Gouda will change your life. To quote Struds, it's like a bouquet of flavors coming in your mouth. Okay, BM, it's unbelievable. So cheese. Cheese is one thing I have no problem with the price because I love cheese. But things that I find that they've gotten over. Well, I don't know if you get it really at the grocery store, but windshield wiper fluid. Are you joking? Windshield wiper fluid now is like $8 at the gas station. This thing used to be like $1.99. It did. So I would say windshield wiper fluid, to me, it's the biggest ripoff going right now. But for actual food that Wow, I have a sweet tooth, so the increase in the price of jubes lately is really annoying me. I've tried to cut them out, so now I can't. I don't get them as often. So that one kind of pisses me off. And but anything organic, because most of it now, some of organic stuff is organic. I question a lot of it.
Well,
only because like organic beef as a farmer. So we have our cows. Our cows are grass fed. And I feed them a little bit of grain and some salt because it's good for them, right? It's good for their coat and everything. But they're not considered organic by the rules. Give me a break. So I do have a real issue with quote organic beef because I find some of it's false advertising. And you pay way too much for that.
Well, actually, my old man is a beekeeper. That's one of his hobbies that he's done for, at this point, probably 45 years. And he always laughs too when he goes to a store and sees organic honey. He's like, "Oh, yeah. Did they have little leashes on the bees to prevent them from going to a different field? Like, how is this organic?" It's
yes,
very, very
that's a really good one, man. Organic honey. Yeah. Like people like to think they're eating healthy. And this is my biggest recommendation. Read the ingredients on anything because I wish like we could go on a whole tangent here about our government and what they don't, right? Like imagine if they actually mandated that the food industry be legit in what they sell. That would be great.
Wouldn't it? Just the last question before I let you go here. Jason Gregor, of course, from the Jason Gregor Show, OilersNation.com, and the DFO Rundown. Right now, I find that covering the Oilers is not very much fun. So I like to look for different things to do. There's the coconut Gouda. I'm going to go.
Yeah, here's the cheese, buddy. See, here you go. We're on Zoom. People can't see us, but there it is. This isn't the coconut Gouda, but this is the balsamic Bellavitino. I brought it down because I thought you were going to ask me about cheese.
Well, I might take a screenshot of that just to post up on socials because I am a big cheese guy. I want to know what you're doing to relax these days. You talked about the farm. Is that something that you do that's relaxing for you to go out there and work with the animals? I'm just tinkering with instruments. I've picked up doodling, which I used to do in high school, just to kind of zone out and reset the brain a little bit. What are you doing when you need a little reset?
Yeah, my wife laughs at me when I'm like, I got to go to the farm. It's relaxing. And it is for me. You get outside. The cows don't care who you. They're like, dude, feed me. And I just like it that it's been a little bit chilly this winter lately, so I don't love having to feed the cows when it's minus 30. But you put on the balaclava and away you go. It's relaxing for me. We got a skidoo out there, so you can go sledding a little bit. The other thing actually right now is my son, a friend of ours, gave him a PS3. He's 8 years old. We've never had a video game before. And him and I have been playing together. I limit him. We're only allowed to play for like 25, 30 minutes. And we don't play every day, usually about 3-4 times a week. And it's this, I don't even know the name. It's like a Lego super heroes game. Mm-hmm. And there's like, I don't know how many levels. You got to get like 250 of these bricks. And I think we're at like 50. And, but every time you get to a new level, you get one of the new characters, right? So we've got Dr. Doom. I'm learning all about the new characters that I'd never even heard of. I'm like when I was a kid, we had Spider-Man and Electro and the Vulture. And, that was kind of the go-tos for me. But now they've got way more and, Iron Man and stuff. So that's actually been pretty fun. We kind of, it's funny because my wife's like, you two idiots, we'll be at breakfast and my son will be like, Dad, we got to do this to try to get into this area and beat this guy. And she's like, what are you guys talking about? Oh, just a video game. And she rolls her eyes. So it's fun little father-son bonding time because we play as a team. And, if one of us, beats a guy or something, there's like a high five. So it's a lot of fun.
There we have it. Jason Gregor again from the Jason Gregor Show every day on TSN 1260, the DFO Rundown Monday and Friday. And of course, OilersNation.com. Last one. Score prediction against the Panthers tomorrow.
You know what? I actually looked this up. The Panthers, here's a funny stat for you. They've only lost 8 games in regulation all year. But do you know they've never lost one regulation game in a row? They've lost 2, 2, and 3. And then they lost to Calgary. So dare to dream, Oilers Nation. Dare to dream. And one time they lost 8-2 to the Kings and then lost 4-1 to Ottawa. So even though they got spanked by Calgary, I will say the Oilers shock Oilers Nation and skate away with a 4-3 victory.
Maybe that's a not so obvious game day prediction right there. Jason Gregor, thank you very much for being my guest today.
Anytime, buddy.
I'd like to thank Jason Gregor for jumping on and spending some time with me to talk about the Oilers, life on the farm, a little bit of cheese talk. We all love cheese talk, but you know what time it is. Time for the voicemail. We've got some fresh voicemails coming in. Voicemails coming in. Let's check it out from the last week or so. A bunch of things. I don't really know what these are. Again, if you want to chime in, if you want to join in the podcast, I would love to have you. I don't generally listen to these beforehand, but I will tell you, if you just say something stupid, I'm not going to play it. Deal? Deal. Let's get to the voicemails. Let's see what we got.
Hey, Bag Milk. Having trouble finding your new podcast. I don't use Apple Podcasts and I can't find it. Is that just because it's not quite up and running yet? Or is it only going to be available on certain platforms? Can you maybe address that today on the show? I'll see if I can find it right off of Twitter. Really a big fan. Very disgusted Oiler fan right now. It's about time that Mike Smith maybe does what the coach did in Winnipeg and realize he just can't do it anymore and do what's best for the team and retire. I'm hoping Duncan Keith does that next year too, because nobody can convince me that that guy has lived up to the bill of $5.75 million wherever he works. He's soft. He gives the puck up.
Didn't I play this last week? Did I not update? Let me see here. Let me check out what clip number. Let's check this one out.
I want you to spill your milk all over me.
Hello. Hey now. I don't even know how to respond to that, to be honest. One more time.
I want you to spill your milk all over me.
We are getting greasy in these streets right now, folks. Well, thank you, Ms. Caller. I don't know who you are. There's no name on that one, but thank you for being a fan, to put it lightly. Check clip number 2 or 3. I don't know. I think I played that the first one last week, but I don't know.
Bonjour, Mr. Milk. For the cheese, you like the brie, or be better with bleu? Maybe the fromage from a can? Go in mouth like
You guys are the best. Do I like blue cheese? I'll eat it in salad, but like blue cheese isn't one of those ones where you can just crack off a chunk and have at her. Like that is not the cheese for you. If you were looking to do that, I'll do that with a feta. I will take a cheddar. I will do all kinds of things. Although I got to check out some of that cheese that Gregor was talking about. A coconut Gouda? Maroon.
Hey, Bag Milk. This message is going to be one of a back-to-back, but I just had some thoughts about the podcast. It sounds really, really good so far, and I like what you're doing in terms of the soundboard and your planning and all that good stuff. And as a podcast itself, it seems great. I think access to it is a little bit confusing, especially the voicemail. I was thinking that maybe there's a chance you could add like a link tree into your bio on Instagram, and it would be better accessible to some people that don't know exactly where they're heading.
Oh, that's a good idea.
So you can just click on it, and you'll have links to both the podcast, the Oilers Nation radio podcast, and maybe you could throw something in there for Arcadia Brewing as well. Shout out Arcadia Brewing. But yeah, no, I think making it a little bit more accessible, especially the voicemail side of things, would be nice, as opposed to having to go to OilersNation.com every single time for the voicemail itself.
You know what? I can absolutely do that. I think that's a great idea, to be honest. I will 100%, 2,000% set up a link tree for this that will have ON Radio, it'll have Real Life, it'll have the voicemail for this one, it'll have Arcadia Brewing, which we obviously love. We want to give them a shout out. ArcadiaYeg.com. That's what their link is. That's their website. Go check it out. I can absolutely do that. No question. We'll set that up today.
Hey, Bag Milk. It's Dan. Finally recording that second half that I told you about there. After our colossal collapse yesterday, what do we do now? Obviously, you had mentioned on Twitter that there's going to be a press conference very soon.
Whoops.
And I don't know the results of this, obviously, because it hasn't come out yet. So this might change the value of this question. But if the Oilers don't do something now, what stars start demanding trades out of the city? Is my greatest fear and question for you. As I think all of us, the only reason that Oilers fans in general are in a major panic is, aside from us wanting to win, I feel like most people are stressed or worried about Connor having second thoughts on staying here past his tenure, Leon staying past his contract here, just losing everything, all because of poor management and association with the organization, especially some of the things that have gone on, like last summer with Bear. Your thoughts on this thing?
Well, obviously I'm concerned about Connor and Leon too. I think fans have every right to be concerned about those two. The ones that I wonder why they don't seem to be concerned about those two is the management. I'm guessing there. That's all conjecture. I hope that something turns around here because I'm with you. Those two are the pillars of this team, and I feel like they're being disrespected at this stage in their career. They need better overall depth around them. And then, first of all, whoopsie daisies on that press conference announcement. That is my bad. I will own that one. I will wear it. I will own it. I tweeted out that there might have been a press conference that would have been on Monday. It did not happen. The source that I had on that was good, but the info was bad. Yet I put it out there, and I will take everything that comes my way because of it.
It's official. You suck.
I agree. I apologize. I'm sorry. I really, really am. I was hoping for some changes, but what was interesting is I owned it. I jumped out in front of it. I said, listen, I was wrong. I apologize. Everybody, that's my bad. Hit me with all you got, and I will take it because I deserved it. But the interesting thing that happened was a lot of Oilers fans, they didn't really seem to care too much that I was wrong. What they cared mostly about was that the organization didn't do anything. They cared mostly about the organization just staying with the status quo at a time when the team has lost 12 or 14 games. And I think that's what pissed a lot of Oilers fans off. And I can't say I blame them, I really, really can't say I blame them because that was one of those ones where it was an ugly loss. The loss to the Senators was ugly. Nothing seems to be changing, but maybe something should. We'll see.
Yeah, I just want to...
Oh my God. I apologize if that's your clip. I don't know whose that is, but I'm not going to... The sound is weird. I'm going to move on to the last one.
Hello, Mr. Milk. Benjamin Dover with the Edmonton Examiner. Who do you think is the worst Oilers Nation fan? Is it Alan Kramer? It's okay if it is, you can tell me. Why aren't you saying Alan Kramer? Why are you so pissy? I am in the Hall of Fame. I ask the tough questions and drink my prune juice. I am the Matlock of reporting. I have white hair and just peed myself.
Why are you so pissy?
Was that you, Alan Kramer? Who's the worst nation citizen? I don't know. Probably me at this point after I gave up. I gave a bunch of people hope. I gave a bunch of people hope that there was going to be a press conference last week. So I'll say I am. I was just like looking at my mentions over the weekend and there was just people like on edge about it. So I was just, hey, that's my bad. I apologize for... We're loading the gun. Not guns loaded. So I apologize to all of you for that one. That is a no bueno. So there goes the voicemail for this week. I will put together a link tree. I will put together something for you so that it's a little bit easier to find. And I promise we will get to that before next week. That's the voicemail. Since this podcast is now over an hour long, I'm just going to end it off by saying thank you to Arcadia Brewing Co. Again, you are my angels that jumped on here despite the fact that I didn't really have anything going on. And for that, I thank you. I do encourage you to go check them out, though, on Instagram and Twitter, Arcadia Brewing Co. Again, there is trivia going on Monday, January 24th at Arcadia. $10 per team, 1 to 4 people. Win some prizes, have a drink, have some food. Arcadia sent me over some gear this week. I'm very, very excited about it. The hoodie is dope. The crew neck is dope. I am going to look stylish. Miss Milk is going to be super excited on me. She is going to be like, ooh, you look so good in that. Thank you, Arcadia. Or maybe she won't even recognize me at all.
Wait a minute! Who are you?
I am Bag Milk. This is Better Late Than Never, and I just want to say once again, thank you for listening. This is episode 3. Thank you to Jason Gregor for jumping on. Thank you to all of you for the voicemails. Keep them coming in. Let's chat next.